All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at the Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having an incredible week. More trades to react to. Jonathan Kuminga is now an Atlanta Hawk. Kristaps Porzingis is now a Golden State Warrior. We're going to talk about the Lakers finally making a deal as they flip Gabe Vincent for Luke Kennard. The Timberwolves looks like they're out of the Giannis sweepstakes, and they actually make a small move on the margins, which I like, for a player that I really like, an Ayo Dosunmu, one that I've been talking about a lot in the last couple of weeks because of his improvement as an all-around offensive player. We're going to break all those deals down. I also want a quick follow-up on the Washington Wizards deal for Anthony Davis yesterday. I kind of fell for the marketing with the Shams Charania tweet involving the way that the first-round picks were portrayed. So I want to kind of readdress that. I've kind of been sitting on that trade overnight, and I actually feel a lot better about it for Washington than I did to begin with. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Make sure you guys like this video. That helps us a lot. And last but not least, if you want to get mailbag questions into our trade mailbag tomorrow morning, drop them in our full episodes on YouTube, and we'll get to them on Friday morning. All right, let's talk some basketball. So the Warriors made 2 trades last night. The Kuminga trade, where the Hawks get Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield, and the Warriors get Kristaps Porzingis. No draft picks there. So basically just using whatever value Jonathan Kuminga had around the league to dump Buddy Hield's contract and essentially getting Kristaps Porzingis back as salary filler there. Then they move Trayce Jackson-Davis to the Toronto Raptors for a 2026 second-round pick via the Los Angeles Lakers. No players in return there. We knew Toronto wanted a big. They had been rumored as pursuers of Domantas Sabonis. I'm not sure if that means that's done for now, but they get Trayce Jackson-Davis. The Warriors clear another roster spot, which will help them convert Pat Spencer. They also have another spot from the Kuminga deal that they can use for a buyout guy, I guess. And they get that second-round pick back in the deal. So Trayce was basically out of the rotation as a third-year guy, so it made some sense to try to get some value out of him. You get a second-round pick. That's cool. So the big swap, so to speak, in terms of the Warriors looking forward in their rotation is you give up Jonathan Kuminga. Buddy Hield was 8th on the team in total minutes this year, so you're technically losing a rotation piece there. But my guess is most of those minutes will end up going to Pat Spencer, and the Warriors have no shortage of guards, so I don't think it's going to be much of a rotation loss there, and you get Kristaps Porzingis back. Now, before we talk about any of the basketball stuff, we have to have the availability conversation. In 2024, Kristaps missed 12 of Boston's 19 playoff games. He did play well when he was healthy. He had a monster game 1 of the NBA Finals, but then he got hurt again, missed 2 more Finals games after that, and didn't look very good when he came back. In 2025, he missed half the season, 40 games to be exact. He had 2 games in the Magic series in the first round where he looked pretty good, but he was pretty bad outside of that. If you remove the 2 Orlando games from the 2025 playoff run, Kristaps averaged just 5 points per game in the other 9 games. He also played just 23 total minutes over the final 2 games of the Knicks series, as he clearly looked like a shell of himself. And in 2026, he's already missed 35 games this season, and we're barely over halfway through this thing. Has had some really nice games, but has also struggled to maintain the consistency as his scoring average is down from what it was in previous seasons. So to put it very simply, for the vast majority of the time over the last 22 months or so, starting in that 2024 playoff run, Kristaps has either been completely unavailable or has been a shell of himself. And so any conversation we have about Kristaps as a basketball player has to be grounded within that idea. So now let's say Kristaps walks into Golden State and he's super healthy right away and he stays that way throughout this season and next season. So in other words, the best case scenario. There's obviously some utility there. The defensive fit is a little weird because Golden State asks their bigs to move around quite a bit. Kristaps is more of a deep drop type of big, but in that drop scheme, Porzingis is a good rim protector, certainly a better rim protector than anybody that they have in-house, or like a similar slow-footed big like Quinn in post, right? So like he brings a rim protection element as a deep drop big. He's obviously an excellent above the break 3-point shooter that will create space. He's a very good switch beater in the post, which will help Golden State's half-court offense. When he's healthy, he is capable of reaching the level of a high-level starter, right? So it's important for us to at least mention that upside. But there is a reason why you got a high-level starter for basically nothing. If we consider the Kuminga value as what got you off of Buddy Hield's money, Porzingis was just expiring salary. So in other words, he was free. So a high-level starter for free for a reason. And it's because Kristaps Porzingis is very rarely healthy and very rarely available. I'm just stunned that this is Golden State's big move, given the amount of asset availability that they had in terms of draft picks that they could try to move to bring in a high-level player. When the report first came out last night, I was so thrown by the offer that I initially thought it was some sort of precursor to something more substantial. I'm like, why would they use Kuminga's value just to dump Hield? Like, are they getting a pick back, right? And then more reporting came out. And it's like, okay, there's no picks. Wait, apparently Golden State has had their eye on Porzingis for a while, dating back to last summer. So this just appears to be it. And I can't believe it. And so a lot of the big picture Warrior stuff I want to hit on in this conversation. Let's start with missing out on Giannis. That was basically all we heard for years in the reporting coming out of Golden State. When they would pass on Pascal Siakam, when they would pass on OG Anunoby, when they would pass on the variety of high-level role players or high-level talent that would come available at the various deadlines around the NBA, whether it was Cam Johnson or it was Michael Porter Jr. or whoever it was, any high-level upside role player pick that they could go after, every single time they'd pass, the reporting would be they're saving their picks and their young players for a potential move on Giannis. And I'll be the first to admit, when the Giannis like kind of pseudo trade request came down last week, I started looking at the landscape and I'm like, holy shit, these guys might actually have a chance to pull this off. I didn't think they'd have any chance under normal circumstances. They would just get outbid. But because of the recurring calf injuries this season, in conjunction with Giannis missing 8 of Milwaukee's last 16 playoff games, it made him appear suddenly to be so high risk compared to other superstar trades for younger, more healthy players that maybe Golden State could squeak in there in a less competitive market to try to make a deal. To be clear, yes, there's a version of this story where Milwaukee and Giannis choose Golden State, and then Joe Lacob in that front office look like geniuses for waiting. But that's not what happened. Turns out Giannis never really considered Golden State, most likely because he wanted to find a long-term home, and Golden State was looking like a 2-ish year window. We talked about that last week. Like, I understood that angle, why he wouldn't want to do this and then have to do it again in 2 years in a more complicated situation where he's a little bit older, right? Sorry to interrupt the video, guys. If you've made it this far, it would mean a lot if you would just take a second to hit that subscribe button. That's the risk of holding out for a superstar like this. Everybody wants him, and he's got some leverage in where he's going to go. So that means it's a long shot under any circumstances. And most importantly, waiting around and hoarding assets for Giannis came at the detriment of improving the team in recent years. And now Steph is about to turn 38 years old, and that window might be closing for good. This is where I want to bring the Lakers into the discussion, because there are so many parallels between that situation and this one. The only difference being that Nico Harrison's dumbass threw Rob Pelinka the world's biggest life raft. And there's no point in looking at the Luka trade as any sort of like boon to Rob Pelinka's approval rating or anything involving his competence, because that trade was unlike anything that had ever happened in the history of the league and is unlikely to ever happen again. And even then, Rob is playing the same damn dangerous game that Mike Dunleavy and Joe Lacob just played. They're putting their eggs in the Giannis basket this summer. And just like the Warriors, they have a real shot. They can put together a package that essentially amounts to 3 first-round picks and Austin Reeves if they structure the deal in the correct manner at the right time. But if they fail to get Giannis, and you don't have a real backup plan to substantially improve the team between now and the start of next season, you could be looking at a situation where Luka starts kind of looking around and wondering why he's playing on one of the worst rosters in the entire NBA. And again, like, even though they have a good package to offer, we have no idea what's going to happen this summer. What if the Thunder have a serious injury to one of their young players and they lose and they're just like, fuck it, let's just get Giannis and put him with Shea? What if San Antonio just looks really bad on offense and their guards look years and years away from being ready for that level of basketball and they go, screw it, let's throw a bunch of picks at Giannis? There are plenty of teams that can clearly beat the Lakers' offer. And so they can put all their eggs in that basket and end up empty-handed, just like Golden State is. But I actually want to drag those corollaries much further into the past. I want to compare the Warriors after their title in 2023 or 2022, in the handful of years since to the Lakers in that gap from when they won the title in 2020 to last year, February 1st, when the Luka Doncic trade took place. In both cases, the Lakers and the Warriors had assets that they could have moved to try to improve their chances. In both cases, Steph and LeBron were still playing at a top 5 level for the most part, give or take a slump here or there, a slow start here or there, or an injury here or there. And in both cases, they had some fixable issues. The Lakers had their second star in Anthony Davis, but they were devoid of smart two-way role players. The Warriors had plenty of those, they had plenty of depth in terms of smart two-way role players, but they didn't have that secondary star. So the Warriors needed to try to find a really high-level single player to improve the team, and the Lakers needed like 2 or 3 guys that could be athletic and guard and knock down a three-point shot. And in both cases, rather than moving their high-value assets to try to give those groups the best possible chance to win, they made cheap, safe moves. The Lakers would move second-round picks for flawed players like Rui Hachimura, who can shoot wide-open threes really well, put the ball on the floor a little bit, but is a bad defensive player, can struggle and read and react sequences, or an aging Dorian Finney-Smith, who actually helped them quite a bit, but had such a short window that they couldn't even retain him at his age, right? Or the Warriors going after a second star, but the cheapest one they could find, passing on the likes of Siakam and OG Anunoby and Cam Johnson and Michael Porter Jr., but going after a much older player in Jimmy Butler that was distressed that they could get without having to include much of the assets that they had available to them. And here's the thing, as we've looked at the Pascal Siakam trade, he's vaulted the Pacers into championship contention. They were literally right there with an opportunity to win the title with a far lesser player in Tyrese Halliburton than Steph Curry is. OG Anunoby, despite the flaws of guys like Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, has helped that team become a perennial contender in the Eastern Conference, 2 wins away from an NBA Finals appearance last year, right? So we've seen the players that Golden State has passed on end up leading massive leaps from the teams that they've gone to. And there is a very specific reason why the Warriors and Lakers never made those aggressive moves to give Steph and LeBron a chance. They didn't believe in them. It's really that simple. These are teams that were in control of the ends of the careers of 2 of the 5 greatest basketball players ever. And during those windows, the first, 3-4 years after the Lakers won the title and the 3-4 years since the Warriors have won the title, in those windows, Steph and LeBron were still very much superstars in this league. And yet all the two teams could think about was the future. Because they failed to realize a very simple truth. LeBron James and Steph Curry don't grow on trees. The vast majority of lottery picks in the NBA just become really good players. It's rare to get a star. Even rarer to get a superstar. And exceptionally rare to get an all-time great. So the Warriors will move into the future with their mediocre Steph-led team now flanked by Porzingis, chock full of all these first-round picks that will most likely become players that are never, ever going to sniff the level that Steph is at right now, let alone 2 years ago. And I get it. It's hard. Making a trade for Giannis is easy. Giannis is a superhero. Very little chance of that backfiring unless he gets hurt. And nobody will criticize you if you get him and it doesn't work out. They'll just look at each other and go, well, it was Giannis. What are you going to do? Not take him, right? Making a trade for a lesser known name is hard. There's risk. You really have to believe in what you're doing and what you're building as a basketball team and the way all the pieces fit together. You have to open yourself to more criticism if it doesn't work. But I can guarantee you right now, the Pacers and the Knicks have never once sat down and said, man, I wish we didn't trade for Siakam. Man, I wish we didn't trade for OG. They believed in their stars. And they put their chips in the middle, and they've experienced great success as a result, with significantly lesser superstar talent than what Steph Curry and LeBron James brought to the table in those years. The reality is Joe Lacob in that front office never really believed Steph could do it again. Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka never really believed LeBron could do it again. And they had the easy way out because with each passing year, the more they did nothing, they got to further entrench themselves in their conservative position because each time their star got a year older, which just made it even less sensible to make that sort of investment in their ability to compete. It's just a damn shame. They deserved better. To end this segment, I just want to read a tweet from Yazzie Goslin who went over. He does great kind of draft CBA work on YouTube, and he just kind of briefly summarized what the Warriors' 2 timelines process put together for them. So again, this is every lottery pick and everything they got from the struggle of the Klay Thompson injury and the Kevin Durant injury and that gap there in 2020 and 2021 and all the subsequent lottery picks and things that came out of it. What they get? Moses Moody, Kristaps Porzingis, and some second-round picks. That's what hoarding your assets gets you. Because guess what? Lottery picks don't equal Steph Curry. They never have. Steph Curry is a once-in-a-generation player. LeBron James is a once-in-a-generation player. Sometimes your first-round picks just turn out to be guys like Jalen Hood-Schifino. Or Brandon Pajemski, guys that are good players, not stars, not superstars, and not Steph Curry or LeBron James. The Lakers and the Warriors failed to recognize the rareness, the uniqueness of the opportunity that they had. And because they didn't believe in their ability to actually make take a risk and push your chips in, put your basketball beliefs on the line to give those guys a chance. And now, you know what? We're not going to watch Steph Curry play in high leverage basketball, probably ever again. Maybe if Jimmy stays healthy next year and Kristaps Porzingis stays healthy next year, but with each patching year, it's just going to be harder. Steph turns 39 next year in March. I've even talked about it with the Lakers. This Lakers team is so bad that it makes a little bit more sense for them to be patient. We'll talk about that with the Lakers here in a minute. I actually thought the Warriors were considerably closer, which is what makes this so frustrating. But those Lakers teams, like the 2024 Lakers, the team that lost in the first round of the Nuggets, they were legitimately one move away from being really good. LeBron and Anthony Davis were both insane that year. Anthony Davis went toe-to-toe with Jokic in that first round series. They just weren't good enough down the roster as Rui Hachimura is losing Michael Porter Jr. on off-ball screens. And, guys are just getting outworked, out-hustled, out-IQ'd, and out-skilled by the depth of talent on that Denver Nuggets roster. That was an opportunity. They didn't go for it. Steph was unbelievable in 2023. They would have moved at that point, Kuminga, at that point, moving James Wiseman, at that point, moving Moses Moody, whatever it was that they decided to move at that point, if they would have invested to improve that 2023 team, real chance to go and win the title again. But no, 2 timelines. Got you Moses Moody, Kristaps Porzingis, and some second-round picks. Congratulations. Today's show is brought to you by presenting sponsor Hard Rock Bet, Florida's sportsbook. We talk a lot of hoops on this podcast, but there's nothing like big game week. On Hard Rock Bet, Seattle is a 4.5-point favorite over New England. For games like this, basic bets just don't cut it. Hard Rock Bet is loaded with special props that you can't find the rest of the year. Scoregami, opening kickoff touchback, all of the off-the-wall bets that make every snap matter. These props only come around once a year, so you might as well have some fun. If you haven't signed up with Hard Rock Bet yet, there's never been a better time. New signups can double their winnings on their first 10 bets, a max of $50. That's right. If you would have won $100 on your bet, make that $200. Plus, you don't want to miss Hard Rock Bet's $7 million big game bonus party. Place a $10 big game parlay, and you'll get a share of $7 million in bonus bets, win or lose. Every parlay counts, and the more you place, the bigger your share. I already built mine. Now it's your turn. And if you're in Florida or New Jersey, the big game energy doesn't just live in the app. Head to a Hard Rock casino for drawings, giveaways, and all the excitement leading up to kickoff. Download the Hard Rock Bet app and make your first deposit today. All right, let's move on to the Lakers trade for Luke Kennard. So I actually like this move as a precursor to whatever the Lakers do this offseason. Again, we talked coming into the season about what the Lakers would need to see in order to feel like they needed to go all in at this particular deadline. And the handful of things you would want to see there is you'd want to see Luka Doncic look like an MVP again. Check. That's good. You'd want to see LeBron look like the player he was right around the deadline last season. I don't think he's reached that level. LeBron's been good. He's been really good. He's been somewhere between that like third team all NBA type of level to something just off of that over the course of the last like 2 months or so. But I don't think he's been good enough to necessarily match, not even close to the level he was this time last year. And then you want to see a coherence with the roster that looks like they're close to competing for a championship, which we flat out have seen the exact opposite of that. We've seen a team that is utterly devoid of shooting and utterly devoid of athleticism. So it became pretty clear the Lakers aren't competing for a championship this season. So that made it so, like, so let's say, for instance, let's say if LeBron did look like the player he was last season and this roster did look a lot closer, now you're talking about like, hey, like, why not make a move for Andrew Wiggins with the first round pick, right? Because you would feel more interested in investing in the short term because you've got a real chance to compete for a title. That wasn't the case. That takes the Wiggins types and moves them out of the equation. Now the Lakers have to look towards this offseason. But you also don't want to stand completely pat. You want to do something to try to help this group a little bit, to give them a little bit of a better chance to compete. Moving Gabe Vincent and a lower level asset like a second round pick for Luke Kennard, who's probably the best role player jump shooter in the entire league right now. We'll get into Luke in just a minute. I like that as at least an attempt to try to improve the roster this year while maintaining your flexibility. Now, going into this offseason, I think it's a really dangerous game to put all your eggs in the Giannis basket. Yes, you have a shot. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like you don't have a shot to get Giannis, but just like we talked about with the Warriors, you could get caught with your hands empty if you're not careful in that regard. So all of this is fine. Like if Luke Kennard is all the Lakers do at this deadline, that's fine as long as they have a plan for how to address the needs as we head into this offseason. That's a conversation for another day. But within this particular season, I actually like this move. And the reason why, before we talk about the actual stats, because Luke Kennard is just an awesome jump shooter. If you are going to be bad on defense, and let's say, for instance, let's compare Luke Kennard to like an Ochai Agbaji, which is another guy that I would have considered in this sort of situation. Ochai Agbaji having a really bad jump shooting season, whether or not you get that or the version of him from last year that made 100 threes and shot 40% of them, who the hell knows? But he's going to help you on defense. But is OG Anunoby going to make the Lakers an elite defense? No. They need substantial changes there. They probably need 2 or 3 high-level defensive wings, and they need a legitimate rim-protecting, awesome defensive foundational center, which they don't have, right? But one of the things that's been really frustrating with the Lakers this year is despite the fact that Luke has been so good, and despite the fact that Austin's been so good, obviously the injuries haven't helped, but despite the fact that their shot creators have been, well above league average in terms of the types of shots that they're able to generate, they're just a terrible jump shooting team. And so in addition to being completely devoid of athleticism, they're completely devoid of shooting. And there's a lot of examples of plays where the Lakers like play good offense, generate a great look for somebody, he clanks it, everyone hangs their heads because they're sad because shit's not working, and then they don't run back as hard, and they don't compete on defense as hard. And I actually tend to think that the more successful this team is on offense, the better chance they have to sit in a stance and at least reach their own individual ceilings on the defensive end of the floor. So, like, if you're going to get a lower-level role player, and that's not to say I wouldn't have liked Ochai Agbaji on this team. I would have definitely liked him, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for them to pull off another smaller move for an athlete at some point before the deadline today. But one of the things I like about Luke Kennard is he immediately comes in and addresses a drastic need for this team in the form of jump shooting. Again, he's been the best role player jump shooter in the league by any measure this season. A Luke Kennard jump shot has been worth 1.5 points this season. That's number 1 out of the 200 players to attempt at least 150 jump shots. Shooting 50% from 3. That's number 1 in the league against among all players who've taken at least 50 threes. Excuse me. Breakdown by percentage, 42% when he's contested, so that's really good from 3. 57% when he's unguarded. That shit's going in if you leave him open. 40% off the dribble on 20 attempts. By play type, 54% on spot-up threes, 56% on transition threes. Really, the only thing that's dragging his percentages down is movement threes. Not a good movement shooter right now. So, for example, he's shooting 1 for 4 when he slips out of screen. So like he's not a guy that can quickly get his feet set if he sets an inverted screen for Luka. He's going to have to be pretty open on that action. Now, one of the things that helps with Luka is Luka's not a guy that gets rid of the ball quickly. He's typically the kind of guy that's going to over penetrate to try to generate a huge amount of space. So that will probably be helpful for Luke in those sorts of situations, but hasn't been super good when he has to get his feet set on the move. 6 for 18 coming off of off-ball screens. So like running off of any sort of movement shooter sequence, he's only hitting about 1 out of 3. But one of the things that'll be unique here is the Lakers, I don't think, are going to run a ton of plays for him to shoot on the move. I think he's mainly going to be a spot-up guy, which I think will be helpful for the Lakers. So what I like about this is you're doubling down on a strength, which is your offensive skill, by addressing a specific need, the inability to knock down catch and shoot threes at a high rate. There is one guy on this entire roster in Rui Hachimura in the rotation who's shooting over 38% from 3. One guy who's like legitimately like he gets a good look, I think, as a fan watching, like, oh, that's probably going in. And now you've brought in a second one of those guys. There's a version of this where you can reach a higher level offensively as a result, and it costs you basically nothing. A bad NBA player in Gabe Vincent with a second-round pick attached. So at least they didn't do nothing. You address a legitimate need. I like the idea of doubling down on offense in the short term to give this particular team the best chance to succeed. But make no mistake, you've got to build out a Luka Doncic championship-level roster this offseason, and that is a tall task to do in one offseason. One of the things the last thing I want to talk about with the Lakers as it pertains to the Giannis chase. We've talked about this before. Don't overthink it. If you can get Giannis, you get Giannis. Giannis and Luka will be able to accomplish so much together that it will make building the remainder of the roster easier than it would be under other circumstances. But there are some diminishing returns there. Luka is one of the highest usage offensive players in the league, so he's capable of absorbing a lot more on offense than most superstars do. When you're in that situation, defense is what becomes most valuable. That's why we've seen the most successful Luka Doncic-led teams over the years be teams that have rim protection, freaky athletes on the perimeter that can knock down, catch, and shoot threes, a skill guard that can help Luka when he's off the floor and as a secondary creator, which they already have in Austin Reeves, and then just literally counting on Luka to be the foundation of what you do on offense. And so I would be really careful putting all your eggs in the Giannis basket this summer when, similar to what we've seen over the years, like look at Phoenix. Like Phoenix went and got an awesome perimeter defender who can score a little bit and a rim protector in Mark Williams, and they hit on one guy on the margins in Colin Gillespie, and this whole thing is coming together, and now they're an awesome playoff team after being a team that looked dead in the water last season. That's the kind of dynamic you could see with the Lakers if they make smaller moves on the margins rather than chasing a superstar. Get a foundational center defensively. Get a wing who can shoot and defend at the 3. You're looking at a team with Luka and Austin that could legitimately compete for a championship as soon as next season. If you go superstar hunting and you miss and you wait for the next guy, like if they just go, oh, another here, 2 small moves on the margins. Oh, DeAndre picked up his player option. We're running it back. Re-sign Rui Hachimura or something like that. And all of a sudden you're sitting next season going like, we're waiting for superstar XYZ to come available. You could run into a situation where you're continuing to push this thing down the line and Luka starts looking around going like, I'm playing on the worst roster in the NBA. This is insane. And so I just would be really careful specifically about holding out for Giannis. And again, I'm aware if they get Giannis, they look like geniuses. It's just so unlikely in this particular situation. All right, the Minnesota Timberwolves get Ayo Dosunmu. I was actually really happy to see this morning. I would imagine this is generally an indicator that the Timberwolves are probably not going to get Giannis. I don't think it's completely over, but I would just imagine you could move all those second-round picks in a theoretical Giannis trade if you needed to try to boost the draft compensation in that kind of trade. So I kind of took this as like maybe Giannis isn't getting traded at this deadline, but we're going to save that for our trade deadline reaction later this afternoon. I've really liked Ayo Dosunmu. I've talked about this quite a bit on the show over the last couple of weeks. The main reason why is the exact concept that I just was talking about with the Lakers. What makes the Lakers roster the worst roster in the NBA for a dead serious team that's trying to compete for a title? It's the complete lack of athleticism and the complete lack of shooting. What has made the Minnesota Timberwolves, even with a young superstar in Anthony Edwards that's had some flaws over the years that he's still working out as he grows into the superstar that he's going to be one day, what has made them a perennial Western Conference Finals contender, a team that I think is a top tier contender in the league right now. What has allowed that to happen? It's a depth of athleticism and shooting. Everybody on the team can shoot. Everybody on the team can run and cover ground and slide their feet. And so as a result, they have the ability to ratchet things up in a way where defensively their athleticism can overwhelm teams. And then on offense, you have this supremely gifted offensive player that's playing surrounded by a bunch of dudes that you can't leave open. You can't leave Jaden McDaniels open anymore. You can't leave Naz Reid open. You can't leave Dante DiVincenzo open. And so they're in a situation where they can ratchet things up to an extremely high ceiling in the postseason because they've built out a roster with a depth of athleticism and shooting. So a smart team who knows why they're awesome has made yet another move for an athlete who can shoot. And specifically, Ayo Dosunmu has actually shown quite a bit of shot creation pop this season as he's improved into a more well-rounded offensive player. So really quickly, to kind of dig into the details of the trade. So 4 second-round picks going to Chicago, Rob Dillingham and Leonard Miller as well. And the Wolves also get Julian Phillips in the deal. He's a freaky athletic wing. As I was kind of canvassing the league, looking for athletes for the Lakers to potentially go after, Julian Phillips was one of the guys that kind of popped up for me. Julian's super athletic, but it hasn't really manifested in the scrap stats yet, like elite rebounding, steals, blocks, that kind of stuff. So it's a upside pick based on his athleticism, but it hasn't really come together in positive impact yet. But that's not really the highlight of this deal, right? This is a nice pivot because of what Dosunmu has shown as that type of skilled off guard that the Wolves have been looking for next to Ant over the last couple of years. He's really blossoming into a super talented athletic skill guard. 299 pick and rolls this season, leading to 323 points, including passes. That's 1.08 points per possession. That's the 84th percentile. Really a high level ability to hit pull up threes off of the bounce when he gets into good, like kind of advantage situations if the guy dies on the screen or goes under. And he can get downhill and get to the rim in ball screens as well. And he's just an awesome jump shooter by any measure. 45% on all threes, 47% when he's unguarded off the catch, 62% on pull up threes. And then again, for a guard, 59% at the rim, which is actually really good for a guard his size. And so I just love the idea of the Timberwolves continuing to hunt every opportunity to bring in athleticism and shooting. There's just a ton of value in that in the modern NBA. The Wolves just keep finding that type of guy. That's why they keep winning. And in this particular situation, what I really like about this move, I've told you guys I was hesitant about the Giannis deal because I thought it would have only slightly increased their chances to win in the short term while massively shortening their window to like a 2 or 3 year window. This is the kind of move that helps double down on what you're already great at and gives you some sustainability. Ayo Dosunmu, Anthony Edwards, and Jaden McDaniels are the type of trio that you can continue to build around for years moving forward. If Jan Berenger ends up popping, that could be your core four that's competing years from now when Anthony Edwards is making $60-70 million and is actually one of the 2 or 3 best players in the league as he's become the well-rounded version of himself. This is a bet on sustainability, which is something I've been preaching for the Timberwolves. So I really, really like this particular move. Ayo is just going to help the Wolves in countless ways to create space, to give them secondary creation, to just make them a better basketball team in every facet. Absolutely loved that move. Lastly, before we get out of here today, guys, so the Anthony Davis trade, we did a kind of a quick reaction to it yesterday, and I was just reacting to it based on the initial intel, which was just what the draft compensation was. So it was pitched by Shams as 2 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks. A very favorable way to place that, to frame that tweet as it pertains to the Dallas Mavericks and their return for Anthony Davis. But as we get to more details, it's a 2026 Thunder first-round pick, which is projected to go 30th. So not a second-round pick, but it's a very late first-round pick, right? And then the 2030 Warriors pick that may not even convey unless the Warriors pull off a remarkable rebuild and have a top 10 record in the league when we get to the year 2030, which feels pretty unlikely at this point. So to be clear, it's still not nothing. If you want to even call that 2026 pick a second-round pick, call it 4 second-round picks in the deal, just for the sake of argument. Like, if you want to go the opposite of the Shams route and pitch it as the worst possible combination, or worst possible framing of the draft compensation, it's 4 second-round picks. That's not nothing. 4 second-round picks just got Ayo Dosunmu, right? So, like, let's not pretend like it's nothing, but it has tweaked my impression of this trade a little bit simply because of one dynamic. Bringing in Anthony Davis for short-term success at the expense of your ability to move all these picks down the line is certainly a payment. But one of the upsides that I particularly like about this is Anthony Davis and Trae Young are almost certainly going to make you a playoff team in the Eastern Conference next year. There is a ton of value in playing dead serious, super intense basketball. It's just different than regular season basketball. It's just different than losing basketball. When the Washington Wizards go around the league and they play opponents, they're not getting their best punch. When the Washington Wizards roll up in, New York, or they roll up in Boston, or they roll up in somewhere out in the West, or a Western Conference team comes to town, when they're like, oh man, here we are, we're in Washington tonight. They're not getting the very best, most serious versions of the teams they're playing. They're playing a lesser version of NBA basketball on a night in, night out basis, because no one's viewing the Wizards as a benchmark test for how good they are as a basketball team. What that means is there is some bad habits that can be formed. There are some basketball realities that those Wizards young players are experiencing that are not actually like what it can be like when you get into serious basketball. Putting Anthony Davis and Trae Young in this group at the expense of, again, roughly the equivalent of 4 second-round picks, 3 second-round picks, and a very late first-round pick, it puts you in a situation where you're forcing these guys to play higher leverage basketball. You better have your shit together for Trae Young and Anthony Davis, or you'll get beat, right? So every regular season game will include higher leverage. You're probably going to end up in at least a first-round series next year. That is high leverage basketball, an opportunity for Trey Johnson to experience that environment, an opportunity for Alex Sarr and Bilal Coulibaly and all these young players to experience that environment. I think there's a lot of value that comes in playing serious basketball. So as I look at it, again, it doesn't mean the framing of the picks is marginal here. Yeah, like they're not as valuable as Shams initially made it sound, but it's still something. We just saw 4 second-round picks go for Ayo Dosunmu, so let's not pretend like it's nothing. But for a relatively low cost, you get to put all your young players into high-leverage basketball situations, and I think that there's real value there. And so I feel differently about the trade than I did when I initially reacted to it yesterday, so I wanted to get my 2 cents in there. All right, guys, that's all I have for this morning. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting us and supporting the show. No matter what happens between now and noon Pacific time, we're going to have some sort of trade deadline reaction. It just might be shorter if nothing in particular interest happens. I will see you guys later this afternoon for that reaction.